Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Rabia, the Customer Service Manager here at Charity Digital, and I might be a familiar face and voice to some of you. Welcome to our webinar today called, well, nobody saw that coming, 2020, a year in review. And the title could not be more apt. This has been a year of surprises at every turn and expectations being challenged, changed, and in some cases, completely turned around. With the unexpected arrival of COVID-19 at the beginning of this year, we've seen massive and enormous change across our lives, from work, home, family, and more. It's had an impact across society, across the world, and fundamentally changed so many things for me, and I'm sure for all of you as well. The impact on the charity sector has been huge. Today, Chris Hall, my colleague and our marketing manager here at Charity Digital, is going to take a look at the year 2020 and how it's impacted the charity sector. He's going to be discussing how plans for the year changed, how COVID-19 impacted the sector, and how charities were ultimately able to adapt to this new reality. Although there have been difficulties, he will also shed light on the unexpected positive developments, how charities have been able to respond to the situation with a flexible, agile approach and use digital to connect with their existing supporters, reach new ones, and ultimately thrive in the face of what initially seemed rather tough and possibly impossible. With lots of interesting facts, developments, and information to share, I'm going to shortly hand over to Chris.
Thank you, Rabia, and hello everybody. Once again, it's Chris here from, as Rabia rightly said, I'm the marketing manager here at Charity Digital. Amazing to have you join us, to have so many of you join us today. I really appreciate you taking the time of what is a really busy time of year. It's been a hard year, hasn't it? It's been a different year, and I think because of that, we decided to have a little bit of a different touch with our webinar today. Christmas, the holiday period, it's always, it's the most wonderful time of the year, as they say. And it's always a time for reflection. It's good to look back on kind of what's happened and what's been done. But not just that, but what we've learned. I feel there's a lot of negativity surrounding the sector at the minute in terms of it's all doom and gloom, but actually there's a lot of positives we can take from that. And there's a lot we can take into 2021 as a much stronger, better, yeah. It surely can't get any worse. That's the thing, anyways. So ultimately, I want to spread a bit of cheer, get a bit festive, as you can see by my terrible Christmas cardigan that I'm sporting at the minute, and by my wonderful background. I will argue blind that Santa is a Geordie, and I will not allow anybody to tell me otherwise. So it's all about that bit of positivity, bit of cheer. Feel free to grab a Christmas tipple if you want. I can't partake for obvious reasons, but I'll cheers my juice glass to you, and just sit back, relax, and let's have a bit of a conversation. Oh, so here we go. Sorry, I had a bit of a slide issue there. So I've done these things a few times now, so a few of you may know who I am, and I'm usually the host and on the other end of the spectrum, doing what Rabia so very kindly did for us today. But for those newbies, here's a little bit about me. Get to know each other a little bit as you're all flooding in the chat. As I said, Chris Hall, I'm the marketing manager here at Charity Digital. I've been almost here 2 years, it'll be 2 years in March, so that's crept up very quickly. So that's my total 2 years in the charity sector, and what a learning and what a time it's been. I've had a total of 7 years in technology, many spent at sort of small scale startups in the US, before I moved back and did some time at Google as well, running their local guides community program. As you can tell by background, accent, and if you've been with me on previous webinars, I'm a very proud Geordie. I'm a shameless Newcastle United fan. You cut me, I bleed black and white. That's my cross to bear, though. We all have our sins. That one is mine. Random facts. So I love penguins. And the next kind of random fact is probably the reason why. I was very fortunate enough to go to Antarctica back in 2016 and got to see these things in the wild. Fiercely loyal creatures, and just really sort of beautiful to behold. Really great place. If anybody ever gets the chance to go to Antarctica, do it. You won't find Santa there, though. He's in the other end. Christmas plans. Well, I am very lucky. My parents live in the US, and it's been a rough year for us all, I'm sure. Haven't been able to see them at all this year. So I applied for a sort of special presidential pardon to let me travel to the US. So I'm I feel very, very humble and lucky to be able to go travel to them. And today is my last day. So I'm off tomorrow. So hence the excitement in the chair you can probably get from my voice. But yes, please let us know what you guys are getting up to as well in the chat. So before we dig into anything and before I sort of go into the main sort of meat of what the webinar is about today, I just wanted to say a really, really big thank you to all our supporters. Huge thank you. We couldn't do what we do without you. And sort of from the bottom of my heart and from everybody here at Charity Digital, I just want to say a massive thanks. Thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for turning up to our events, webinars, podcasts. Thanks for engaging with our content and with us and talking to us. We are like you, we're a charity, we're going through very similar things where we understand and feel what the sector's going through. So big thank you. It will get better, I promise you that. Anyways, get on to the serious stuff now. So what we're here to talk about today. So we've got sort of 4 key areas of discussion. First one being sort of what we thought 2020 looked like. If you were with us at the sort of beginning of the year, or the beginning of 2020, I ran a webinar then called the top 5 trends to dominate 2020. I thought it might be sort of a little bit of fun to look back and see what we got right and what we got wrong. As you can imagine by the title, not a whole lot we got right, to be honest. And I don't think that's any fault of our own. But we'll go from there to kind of understand the positive side of it. We'll go from there to then talk about what actually happened this year. So look at some of the data and some of the surveys and reports that have come out that have told us what actually has happened in terms of fundraising, service delivery, and just charity operations on a whole. We'll have a bit of a chat through the data and what that says. Then I want to move on to the positive, and I want to say, like, what did we learn from this year that's gone? There's been so many good things, you know, as well as negatives. There's been so many positives that we can take away and use to look forward to next year. So I want to spend most of the time today looking at that. And then I've done a little bit of future scope, and I dare say after how wrong we got this year, but a little bit of future scoping of what we can expect from next year. Again, won't be going into too much detail there, but that'll be a webinar for probably early in the new year. But want to sort of touch on some points that I think we should all be looking out for next year. And of course, we'll round up with some questions as well. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A where you can pop your questions in, and Rabia can pepper me with those questions at the end. If you do wish to ask a question, hit the Q&A bottom at the bottom, sort of on the bottom center. It looks like 2 text boxes overlapping, and post your question in there for us. So hopefully that rambling of a madman give you enough time to go and grab your Christmas tipple, get a comfy seat, and we'll dive in. Right, so where did we see things going at the beginning of last year? I think it's safe to say that we really didn't see COVID-19 coming. And as I said a moment ago, at the beginning of last year, we did run a webinar that looked at the top 5 trends to dominate 2020. And the 5 things on the screen is what we said then. As I said, it might be a little bit of fun to see what we got wrong and what we got right. So the first thing we kind of forecasted was a year of building trust and transparency. And this was built up of a sort of increase in drop in donations over the last kind of 10 years it's been. I think we quoted a stat at the beginning of that webinar, which like 48% of people believe charities are trustworthy, according to CAF's, a report by CAF, which showed a lot of area for a sort of improvement in building trust and transparency with donors. However, a further drop in donation this year can't really be accounted to that of previous years. Charities are focusing on fundamental operations, and and the nation is obviously going through its own troubles, losing massive amounts of income through furlough, redundancies and everything else. So I think we can happily say we got that wrong. And I think there's, as we'll come on to later, there's a different level of trust and transparency that we need to build going forward, but for totally different reasons. So happily chalk that one in the wrong column. AI and new tech. So I struggled with this one again, but why we thought 2020 originally would be the year that people really adopted artificial intelligence, machine learning, and new shiny tech, I think it's fair to say that for most charities, it's been a case of bringing in the tech that could help them adapt to the current environment. It's more been about the tech that has allowed charities to run virtual fundraising events, or it's been the tech that provides charities with the right data to make those informed decisions that are as we're suffering financial inaccuracies and all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of been for a different reason again. I think the sector's adopted a lot more tech, but it's not been the AI and shiny new tech that we had anticipated at the beginning of the year. And again, another one for the wrong column in that regard. Sorry. The third one in the wrong column is customer journeys and personalization 2.0. So at the beginning of the year, we highlighted this as the next big thing. We suggested that to grab the interest of new donors, charity had to move to being more like a good waiter, is the sort of analogy I gave at the time, which was make recommendations and anticipate marketing and content based on what your users' interests are. Charity should send users on a journey from first point of contact all the way to the thank you. And I believe at the time I used blood.co.uk is a good example about completely different type of donations, and it's one I've sent regularly. But I love the journey I go on, which sounds really strange now, I'm kind of saying it out loud, when I go to donate blood. So from the minute I sign up to go to a donor centre, the contact I get and the content I receive all the way through it, how to, what I need to do when I get to the donation centre, all that sort of stuff, all the way through to when I'm there. So, the friendliness of the staff and the nurses that are there, all the way through to the banter that I get, and the talking about Newcastle and all the fun things, the little nuances that you get, to then the custard cream and a packet of crisps afterwards. I really enjoy it, and then that always goes one step further. And I think what they've done more recently that I think is absolutely brilliant is you get that text message a couple of days after to tell you exactly where your donation has gone. So your pack of blood's been sent to X hospital and has helped such and such do this. And that for me is so fulfilling, so rewarding. And it's just the best type of thank you could possibly get. And it encouraged me then to, when they send the next text message, or call me asking to give again, I've remembered how happy I felt in that moment. And I'm often compelled to say, yeah, sign me up for the next one straight away. And we kind of touted that those types of journeys is the thing charities should be really working towards at the beginning of this year. But again, it's become less of a priority as charities have focused more on their core donors, and this is something we kind of profess that everybody should do. It's been less about getting new money from new people, but more about getting more money from the people who give to you already. While that change has happened, I think the replication could still be there. So while I think this is wrong, I think there's a lot we can draw from it in terms of thanking core donors as well. Don't ever forget to do that. It's almost as important as it is thanking new donors. So there's an element of that where I think journeys are still really important. But for the grander scheme of things, I've kind of chalked it down to the wrong. I do have a think we got two things right. So kind of right. And the first thing we kind of brought up in the beginning of the year's webinar was the real value of multi-experience, which was sort of used as an audience engaging with your charity in many different ways, video, audio, imagery, stuff like that. We did see this a lot this year by necessity, and moreover from what I call user-generated content or UGC perspective. Many charities ran huge campaigns where donors or service users sent in images or videos to encourage other users to either donate or join services as well. A great example here from the Together Trust, who turned to UGC for a user-generated content for a social media campaign that urged people to let others know why they're thankful during the COVID-19 pandemic. To help supporters create their own engaging posts, that the Together Trust actually produced a downloadable template and gave advice on sharing images and using hashtags. And it also carried a really effective call to action as well for supporters to make additional donations. I thought that was a great example when I was kind of putting this together, and I've seen throughout the year. Another one is, I'm sure if you watch as much terrible telly as I do, you'll have all seen the Age UK advertisement going on at the minute with the elderly people saying how much they love Facebook and connecting with their friends and family through digital means as well. So they're great examples of how UGC is in video and new types of content has brought the sector together this year. And for those reasons, I've popped this in. Yeah, we got that one right, I think. And the last is a fairly obvious one, and something we have talked about a lot this year, and that's the necessity of a digital culture. And I think this is, it's an automatic right, and I think it'll be an easy trend that we can forecast for the next 2 to 3 years easy, and well beyond that. This year kind of cemented the importance of having culture and strategy. That digital isn't an action, it's actually a mindset. It's not a department, it's your whole organization. And culture really supports the agility, adaptability, sustainability, and of course inclusivity that a lot of charities have had to adopt in 2020. So easy right there for us. So what actually happened in 2020? Sorry, I'm just going to take a drink quickly. My squash. Thanks for that. Well, we did turn to a recent piece of research called the COVID-19 Voluntary Sector Impact Barometer, which has been conducted by the Nottingham Trent University, Sheffield Hallam University, the NCVO, and the Economic and Social Research Council to kind of help us with this particular part of the webinar. The survey's been sent on an ongoing basis to around 700 charities that are all of different sizes, scopes, and missions. And granted, that does seem quite a low sample size when you look at the amount of charities in the sector and in the UK. The results are as you expect. 11% of charities felt they are unlikely to be operating this next time next year. Anything above zero is frankly a terrible thing with all the amazing work that we do. We found that they found that 38% of finances have deteriorated, which have kind of come with a mix of the next two. A massive increase in the need for charity services, which almost 60%, which is incredible, and the huge, again, 60% increase in operating costs that's come about by supporting staff and changing offices and everything you need to do to operate in a COVID world. Ultimately, this has left to a really sort of sour taste within the sector. And I think rightly so in a lot of ways. With 80% expect COVID to negatively impact their organisations. And this is fair and expected. And while it makes for quite frankly scary reading in some ways, there's still a lot of work to be done and support needed from the government as well. But I think it dwells a lot on the negative. And I think there's a lot of positives we can take from this year, which is why I don't want to dwell on this slide too much, and I'm going to change it. One thing we talk about here at Charity Digital is learns. What did we learn? We get better by learning, we get better by making mistakes. I think, we learn some of the biggest successes come from failures. I could reel off probably and 4 or 5 more cliches, but I'm gonna stick to just those few. But it's really important to actually look at what we learned from this year and actually take that into 2021 with real positive mindsets and realize that it's there's still fighting the dog yet. And I've kind of come away with sort of 4 or 5 key learnings for us today. So number one, the sector is braver, bolder, and challenging the left behind stamp. I think we have somewhat rightly, somewhat wrongly been stamped with that. It's archaic, it's left behind, it's not quite doing what what everybody else is doing. But 2020 has completely changed that. I did a podcast recording yesterday with a good friend of ours, Dean Gillespie at All We Can, who said 2020 has been their digital evolution, and he says 2021 will be the digital revolution because of what's happened this year. The most positive impact out of 2020 is that charities have been forced to change and adapt, and that is good. That is a good thing. We're changing, we're growing. Staggering from the same survey, 92% of charities moved their services online. 92%. That's enormous, absolutely enormous. And as well as, as that sort of 56% of grows, or 57%, sorry, more service grows, digital allows you to reach a ton of more people. And as we work into next year, when, unfortunately, some of the negative of digital is that there is some exclusion as we move out of COVID and a hybrid world comes into existence, you'll be able to reach more people from services and fundraising than you ever have been able to before. It all proves that we're willing to adapt, we're willing to test, we're willing to learn, no matter how difficult. And I think we should all give ourselves a pat on the back for that, to be quite honest. I've just read in the comments there that someone's had their best fundraising year ever. And it's things like that exactly why. Exactly this sort of this want and drive to be brave, to be bold, to change is the sort of reason why we're able to make things like that happen, which is great to read. Thank you very much for that, Juanita. I really appreciate that. The next is the fact that we are survivors, thrivers, and providers as charities, but not just as charities, as charity people as well. And I think it's quite often forget that there's human beings behind these organizations, and it's the mentality and the hard work of these organizations that are really pushing things forward and are really fighting the good fight, essentially. I'm going to make a terrible Rocky 6 quote here, but I'm not gonna lie, it's not terrible. I absolutely love quoting Rocky. It's kind of not about how hard you get hit, but how hard you can get hit but keep moving forward. And I think that sums up 2020 in a nutshell, right? 2020 was all about surviving. It was all about surviving. And as human beings, we are innately sort of born to survive. We find ways of making it happen. That goes back down through the years. And a really good example that isn't my example of survival is, electricity and climate change. We used to power our houses with whale oil until we nearly killed all the whales. In term to be able to grow out of that and sort of save the whales, we created electricity. Now we're burning through fossil fuels, and to be able to save the earth, we're going to new means of power and that sort of thing. So we find ways to keep evolving, keep adapting, and keep surviving. Once the dust of lockdown had settled as well, like a lot of the charities that had been in that survival mode went on to thrive, as Juanita's just shared, and had sort of their best fundraising year ever. The Blackboard Status of UK Fundraising report came out and showed that 70% of charities were either able to maintain or increase their fundraising revenue during lockdown, all while adapting to these new working environments, supporting staff through different mental health issues that lockdowns caused as well, and delivering vital services to millions of users. It's just incredible when you think of it. And I know we asked you for that we asked you for some stories to share with us that we could read out during this webinar. We received quite a lot, and quite a lot of them were positive, but I wanted to share one that wasn't necessarily one of the more negative ones right now, and we'll be sharing some more in a minute. This is Alex Lang's story from a small charity called Crucial Crew. And this is verbatim. My 2020 story is a tale of woe and disappointment, albeit really two stories, but connected. In 2019, I paid for goods for the annual Crucial Crew scheme, as has been done for the last 29 years, and the income from 2020 would have covered this outlay. However, as we didn't see COVID coming, and with no income in 2020, I personally am now seriously out of pocket, as no fund seems to cover retrospective payments. The second part was when the funding, which was roughly 2.3 million for a major build and fit out project, was cancelled due to reduction in central government funds to local authorities. I am now trying to find this amount, but due to COVID, it would appear that all major funders and government departments are concentrating on supporting the pandemic, and rightly so, making what was a challenge to be a nightmare. My quest continues, and who knows, 2021 may open new doors. Only 2022 will tell. And I wanted to share that with everybody because I think this really embodies the people, as I was saying before, that work in the sector and how we've grown. We're not extra mile people, we're extra 100-mile people. And Alex, I really hope your investments pay off. And I really do want to follow your journey closely. So please keep in touch if you are listening to us today. We've all come such a long way in the last 12 months, and overall, we've got a lot to be proud of. So please do give yourselves a pat on the back. The next sort of learn that I have is that digital is a mindset driven by leaders. And notice I mentioned leaders and not leadership. I think they're two very different things. Leaders can be anybody within an organization who are championing that change and pushing for the digital evolution or revolution, whichever you decide to call it. 30% of charities did struggle during lockdown, the opposite to that 70%. But as you'll find it from the same report, as you might expect, it actually wasn't due to size. You'd think it was the smaller charities, but no, it wasn't. And which kind of proves to us, it was completely size agnostic. That digital growth, adaptation, and change is total mentality and culture of an organization. Those that adopted that digital mindsets did so throughout their whole organization, realizing digital isn't just one part, but the whole. There was a realization that digital encompassed more than just social media. For so long, a digital strategy involved marketing and social media on fundraising, but it actually expanded through necessity, sometimes through necessity, sometimes through good planning. It expanded to remote working. That made us think of our digital infrastructure. How are people going to work from home? Made us think about team collaboration. How am I going to talk to teammates, colleagues, bosses, volunteers, all of those? And video conferencing. How am I going to deliver my services? How am I going to chat to people? How am I going to do webinars? How are we going to do podcasts? We delivered services online. We fundraised from desks. We've changed. We made it happen, and all by changing the way we approach the charity's operations to being more digital, essentially. And the last one is we'll be better prepared. I think one of the biggest learns from this year is that we now know where our vulnerabilities are. I think most charities have already done the hardest part, which is acknowledging that the need for change and having the brevity to take that first steps as well. As I said, we're very aware of our vulnerabilities, and we can plan what needs to be done to rebuild, and mitigating risks and becoming truly resilient as we go. I think it's important to say at this junction that whether you're optimistic or concerned about your charity's future, I thoroughly believe that there's still time to do something about it. There's loads of time. There's always options. There's always new things to try. There's always new ideas, but with solid structure, strategy, and planning. And don't just take that for us. As I said, we had sort of asked everybody to share some stories with us, and many of you did, and they were great. I wish I could have time to share them all, but I don't. I do have 4 that I would really, really like to share with you. And thank you everybody who did send one, and really appreciate it. So first up is a story from Lee Clark, which is from large charity York Museum Trust. Again, all verbatim. I'm reading it out as we got it in. With zero budget and limited resources, York Museum Trust created a simple, playful idea which captured the imagination of millions worldwide, known as #CuratorBattle. The battle used Twitter to share art objects under a given theme, challenging other museums to do the same, creating interactive threads of objects to enjoy. For international institutions to tiny galleries, all were inspired to join in and share their weird and wonderful objects, bringing joy to so many people in such challenging times. In total, more than 1.5 million people engaged with Curator Battle, and York Museum Trust objects were seen by more than 5.4 million people on Twitter alone. The battles were covered by media, including CNN, The Guardian UK, China Global Television Network, and BBC One's Have I Got News For You? Great. The Yorkshire Museum's Twitter following increased by 108%. And in a survey of over 200 people, 50% of Curator Battle's audience were engaging with York Museum Trust collections for the very first time. 83% strongly agree that Curator Battle helped them feel connected with others during lockdown, the main reasons being to be entertained and to lift my mood. In a time where audiences could not visit cultural venues, 86% stated that Curator Battle met their need for cultural activity during lockdown. I absolutely love that, and I think Petra has pretty much said what I was about to say in the chat, which is, love the collaborative approach. Exactly, you've be able to connect with so many different people from one simple avenue. Absolutely great creativity, and creativity is going to be key, I think, when we and I'll mention this when we come round to our trends for 2021. But just shows with a little bit of thought and a little bit of creative spark, and bringing others to the table, you can do so much from so little. Well done, and I hope people can learn a lot from that. So next up, we have Juanita Hughes' story, and I think it might be the same Juanita who we've been live in the chat, which is from Medium Charity Challenge Ministries Swaziland. Here's her story. Like everyone, lockdown was a like for everyone, lockdown was a curveball. It was then a challenge, being rather ancient of age and not exactly up to speed with technology, to embrace the virtual world and jump into the waters of desk-based fundraising. The week before lockdown, I was set a fundraising target of 300,000 for the financial year 2020-2021. I had to immediately review our fundraising strategy and decided to work to a 3P strategy. Protect. I love any 3P analogy. Being a marketer, I've used something similar before. First P, protect our current supporter base, promote our mission through electronic platforms, perform desk-based fundraising in whatever creative way I could. Following these guidelines, I worked on protecting the current supporter database, wishing to maintain contact but offering a payment holiday if necessary on any child sponsorships. The children in our orphan care program in Eswatini, I hope I'm saying that right, recorded a message of encouragement to our supporters. The choir, who had toured the previous year, recorded a song which we circulated. We then decided to put on a virtual choir concert. We did a recording and then live streamed it. It included an emotive appeal, and to our considerable surprise, it raised 30,000. Through all our efforts, we reached our 300,000 target in 7 months and are well on our way to 400,000. Again, amazing work, Juanita, and all the team at Challenge Ministry Swaziland. It goes back to our UGC concept that we kind of brought in before, the way you used a set of co-donors and your own network to be able to boost your fundraising. Incredible story to hear, and thanks for sharing that with us. Our third story is from Kalisa's online program delivery. It was submitted by Nora Russell from Kalisa. In March, we moved quickly to adapt our programs to online delivery to ensure we could meet the needs of some of the UK's most vulnerable young people. We now have a suite of digital programs and toolkits, which mean young people and the professionals and family who care for them have constant access to our resources. We also adapted the digital content to be available as hard copy guidelines, which we have distributed to offenders in prisons, many of whom have been confined to their cells for up to 23 hours a day to limit the spread of infection. This enabled us to directly support over 100 young people through a combination of group webinars, digital toolkits, and more recently face-to-face delivery. It has also meant we were able to train over 2,000 professionals in prisons, school and care settings to better support the vulnerable young people in their charge throughout this critical time. This met a 6-fold increase in the normal demand for our services for professionals. The toolkits are free to download and are available by following this website, www.kalisa.co.uk/COVID-19/resources. I think that's an incredible story, Nora. It really is. And I think, people see that 57% increase in services and think, oh, how are we going to deal with that? And the way you handle that, bringing in digital, and then you've kind of already jumped the gun by moving back to that hybrid model as well. I think that's absolutely incredible. So well done you. You're ahead of the curve. I hope your story can help a lot of others who are on the webinar today take something back to their organisation as well. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And the last one is from Alistair Fairley at Micro Charity Hastings Emergency Action Resilience Team, otherwise known as HEART. Alistair said, we set up HEART in March 2020, just before lockdown, knowing that people in our town would need practical help with shopping, information, collecting meds, and so on. It took off and ended up with over 1,000 volunteers and performing thousands of tasks in our community. Fundamental to managing this was our decision early to create a comprehensive database for managing volunteers and matching them with requests for help. All our comms are digital, and while it's been a huge learning curve, we're now working with the NHS, the local councils, and dozens of volunteer groups to coordinate the emergency response. And all this has been done entirely by volunteers. Outrageous work, Alistair. I think that when Zoe and I saw this one come in, we thought this was incredible, and I really want to learn more. I want to know how you went about setting up the database, what database you're using, whether you're taking this on a national scale now with working with the NHS. I think what's come from just the goodwill of people, like we're talking about, and I was talking about earlier, to become a a charity in its own right, and then from then on become a vital part of the community, I think is absolutely incredible. We'll be in touch soon, I'm sure, Alistair. We are really interested in your story, and want to know more that we can share with everybody, and we'll make sure to do that afterwards. So a big thank you to everybody for sending in those stories. They really were incredible. Now I'm going to I want to move on to our sort of fourth and final part of the webinar, which is looking forward to what we think next year will bring. In the kind of 2020, 2021 expectations, I don't think it, as I've rightly put on the slide there, it won't be worse. We won't allow it to be worse. I haven't gone into too much depth into these, just because I'm a bit wary with not knowing what might come next year. But and we'll also be running some more content on this in the new year. So first up, I think this is an obvious one. Brexit. I think we'll stop hearing about COVID-19 and more about Brexit as that kind of comes in. That Jan 1 deadline is looming, and the uncertainty over a deal or no deal. Brexit will very quickly once again become an area of concern. And while there's still a lot unknown, I think there are some things to watch out for. Predominantly, if you do have an international charity that works across borders, how can you do that digitally while confined into the new rules? Also, potential changes to GDPR. I don't think this will happen, but I think there'd be an absolute uproar if it does. But I wouldn't rule it out of the realm of possibility. GDPR is very much an EU thing, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there, and what changes come. And changes to funding are just three that we've put in there, but we'll be covering a lot of content and tracking it quite closely over the next couple of months. The next is sort of hybrid and blended, and I think I've already used hybrid a few times throughout this webinar. I fully expect you to see these new terms throughout the year. They'll be kind of covering types of working, hybrid types of working, hybrid operating, hybrid events, pretty much everything. We'll see a lot of it in 2021. And simply because the sector will never be the same again, and I don't think it ever should be. We've been able to reach so many more people by more charities going digital. That hybrid, as I said earlier, will just amplify that tenfold by those who are digitally excluded getting the face-to-face side, while we'll be able to reach out to many more people online. Blended working is something that will become the blended hybrid working is something that will become the norm. And that's you might have a big office now, a lot like us. We have an office of sort of 20 people. We might move offices. We might get rid of just a bunch of desks and have more of a meeting space in there. I think the necessity of having 20 people in an office all at the same time it'll be no longer. There'll be much more of a hot desking type of scenario. For example, I know for my partner works for WWF, they have 500 staff but 250 desks and that sort of thing. And they've always had the same, they've always had that hot desking approach to work and a much more of a community-led sort of approach to that. And I think we're seeing the reflection of this already. I don't know if you all saw the news last week. Deafblind UK sold its offices for £2.5 million as they sort of, they move to that more consideration approach of hot desking, and that, proving that people are still working from home to good effect as well. I think that we'll all have to change the way we collaborate. We'll all have to change the way we support each other and our staff, and pay peace of mind and mental health. And we also have to make sure we're secure. That's one of the biggest things to come out of this as well. Hybrid working will increase the need for cybersecurity. Whether you want to pay attention to it or not, the more sophisticated we get, the more sophisticated criminals get as well. So we'll have to be, it's harder to secure devices over remote work than it is when they're all in the same room. We'll also have to get used to sort of offering those virtual and physical experiences. Like I said, this will build new demographics and audiences and user base, but ultimately will allow us to reach more people, as I said, both users and donors, more than ever before. The other three things to come, the first one is, as I mentioned, was a trend for last year that we kind of put in the wrong column, and I think it'll change ever so slightly this year, which is sort of donor user trust. And this goes, this one's a big one for us as well. As we use more digital tools and tech, our audiences will become less forgiving. The better we get with technology, the better they'll expect us to be at the same time. So, one way to sort of counteract that is to build credit. Constantly talk to them, get feedback on services, get feedback on campaigns, get feedback on your donor user journeys, and thanking them as well, whether they're, whatever support they're giving you, whether it's through services, whether it's through donations, whether it's through anything else, helping you, helping you with training, being a speaker, anything like that, turning up to events, continually thank them for the support in difficult times. Another one we mentioned is digital culture and strategy. Digital success, as we mentioned, is determined by an organization's mindset. And with New Year plans coming up, I think they'll be more sustainable and resilient. And that'll kind of resound through everybody's digital strategy as well. And we have some great content on creating a digital strategy, and we're going to be launching some additional digital strategy courses in the new year as well, so keep out for those. But culture and strategy are something that will always be adopting and always be changing as we keep going forward. So it's a big thing to focus on in 2021. And last but not least is we've already touched point in the stories and the chat, creativity in abundance. I think 2021 will be the most creative year for charities yet, and I'm kind of I'm willing to stick my neck out on that, just by looking at what's been done so far this year. Now, the initial panic of we've got to change, we've got to do this is over. The dust's settling a little bit, and I think the ingenuity of the sector will come out tenfold. We've kind of unlocked Pandora's box, I think, of digital, if that's such a thing. And I really do expect to see charities just getting more and more creative. And we had a ton of stories, and we could only pick 4. All of them in some way express some form of creativity. I expect that to get more and more. So that is a roundup of what I think, a quick roundup of the 5 things I think will come in 2021. And that's it from me. That's all I've got. Thanks very much for joining me. I hope you're all feeling positive, and all I can see by someone's chat is in capital letters, totally stoked. I feel totally stoked about next year. I hope you all feel totally stoked as well. Yeah, big thank you. I think we're going to dive into some questions now, Robs.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. I'm back again. The first thing I'd like to do is thank Chris for such an interesting and enlightening presentation. There's a lot of good news out there, with the doom and gloom, all the sort of worries about the upcoming Brexit situation, the ongoing pandemic. There's still a lot to celebrate here. And, having listened to the presentation, heard the stats and things, and read through your comments, I think there's a massive well done, needed for all of your work across the sector. It's so inspiring, such brilliant work being done. And I really hope you take the next sort of week or so to celebrate some of your good work. And in the spirit of communication, let's move on and have a look at some of the questions that have come in. So our first question is from Sarah from In Hope, and she asks, have you found that online events have been used to raise money mainly, or to increase greater connection with supporters who we might not have seen in person before, or a bit of both? What online event has been the most successful, and why?
Oh, that's a really good question, Sarah. And I'd quite like to open that one to the chat as well. Obviously, our online events are very different from those that charities are running. We run our events for charities. But from a lot of the sessions, we had a great session at our digital fundraising day by a charity called Orchard Trust. And they essentially replaced their annual in-person summer fair with a digital one. And I know they met the equivalent, they met their fundraising target for that event. I can't remember exactly what the numbers were, but I shall dig up the session that that Louise did at our fundraising day for you to have a look at afterwards. But I think it's been a mixture of both, is my feeling. I think online, as I was saying during the presentation, our virtual events is a great way to reach new people. Our conference we can use as an example of that. Last year in person, we had 400 people sign up for our physical conference. By making that digital, we're able to reach a lot more people. You're not limited by capacity of event venues or anything like that. When you're not limited by travel, being a London-centric organisation, we're very conscious to reach people that are from outside of London. We usually do our bursaries for our travel bursaries for a conference, for example. But we see this as an opportunity to just knit people together. And I think it's a great opportunity to reach far and wide and get them introduced to your charity. But that doesn't mean I don't think the two are different. The two can be the same. Obviously, you put a pay stamp on it. You're probably going to reduce your turnout rate in some way, shape, or form. But if it's donation based, we're seeing a lot of success through that. I know other organisations have done they've run webinars that are based on donations instead of charging. It's about balance. I think, like everything else, it's all about balance. Building new audiences, meeting new people, and not being overly selly right straight away. It's about connecting with them first, and that is marketing in a nutshell. And it's about building emotional connections with people first and sending them on that journey.
Thank you, Chris. It really does sound like so much of sort of what we do has kind of evolved from sort of, needs to sort of an ongoing conversation and relationships with supporters and charities. And it's very valuable insight.
I'm just going to answer Rowan's question really quickly in the chat. Will we have a session on running educational webinars? We did that a few weeks ago, Rowan. Mimi and I actually ran a webinar on running webinars. We'll chuck it in the email we send out afterwards.
Cool, excellent. Okay, so we're going to move on to the question from Julie, who asks, do you not think that focusing on the customer journey is still a priority, albeit to focus on exploiting opportunities to maintain and build donations, sponsorship, etc., from the existing core donors, especially in the current environment?
Absolutely, and that's kind of, I don't think I was clear enough when I said that at the end. I think I tripped on my words a little bit. Our initial trend for last year was focused on acquiring new donors. I totally agree, 100%. There should be a core donor user journey as well. But the kind of the same story is, the same story I used with blood.co.uk. I would class myself as a core donor for them. I give every 3 months, and I'm kept pushed into that funnel every time. So it's a case of, to use that example again, it's a case of, I get my packet of crisps, I get my cup of tea, I get my custard cream at the end, and then I get my text message a week later or a few days later that says, thank you, this is what your donation done. And then I get a phone call a couple of days later or an email saying, can we book you in for the next session? I haven't seen a better example of a journey for that, and I know I'm slightly biased because it one that really works on me, but it's there should totally 100% be different journeys for different types of of your donors, whether you've got new donors, core donors, philanthropy donors, legacy donations. It's all different. They all should have their own time in the sun, essentially, and have their different donation journey, donation model, in different exit and entry points as well. 100% agree.
Yeah, amazing, thank you. So yeah, important to specialize, it sounds like. Okay, so we're moving on to digital. So Helen asks, we are at the very start of our digital journey and need direction, but without knowledge of first steps, we don't know who to approach to help strategize, create our roadmap, any advice or companies that can help with initial plans.
Yes, yes, and if I'm right in thinking, Helen, you've reached out to me about this personally, and I haven't had a chance to get back to you yet, so I'm going to apologise in advance. But I will answer your question now, which is great. So there are a lot out there. We do our own, so we have a slew of Charity digital strategy webinars. We also have an ebook that can help if you're looking for something more, as a guide to help building your digital strategy. There is also a couple of companies that are, we have our own course, as well, before I go on, called Digital Strategy for Resilient Charities, and we'll be bringing that back in the new year, so you can look after that, where it's a 6-week course for, I think that it costs about £500. And we do offer some bursary places for that as well for smaller charities. And you can join that, and it's run by us and a company called Dot Project. But there are some other great people out there in the sector as well. Zoya Mar Digital, of course, she's a trustee of ours, and super knowledgeable in all things digital. It was definitely worth reaching out to hers. what else? Who else? We got Platypus Digital. We've worked with them a few times as well. There, or another one, and there is the Digital Candle as well, which is run by the Catalyst, but that's more of a one-on-one. More of a one-on-one consultation where you can talk to them about specific problem. That's all I can think of on the sort of balls on my feet, but I'll have another look and we'll include them in the resources.
Great, thank you. Lots of helpful starters there, though, definitely. Okay, so we now move on to a question from Heidi, and she asks, there are often a number of barriers for deaf people accessing digital content and online events. Do you have any advice or recommendations on the best digital platforms to use or organizations that could offer support to our charity in delivering digital content, specifically, I think, for the deaf community?
Yeah, so we we have subtitles enabled for this, which is it's an automatic plugin through Zoom, I think. This as well, which Mimi was here should remind me of how much this costs. I think it's $20 a month, so like £15-16 a month. And we can just turn those off and on at the beginning of every digital session. We tend to stick to that. But there's and that seems to work from us, and it's done through rev.com. Automatically links into Zoom, so when we come to set this up, we just turn the auto captions on, and I think it pops up for users on your end when the webinar starts that closed captions is available. I just got an echo of myself there. Sorry, I put us off. For specific advice, though, there's sort of live caption we've used before, but it can be quite costly, and that was with a voice box they were called. We used them for an event, but we were quoted quite high prices after that. I know some of the Microsoft tools have inbuilt captioning as well. Teams, for any video conversions, YouTube do an automatic captioning as well, but they're not great. Again, we use rev.com to burn the subtitles on. AbilityNet always great as well if you're looking for just general advice on and guidelines to follow. We're really pally with them, so would definitely recommend recommend chatting to them if I haven't sufficiently answered the question.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Lots of information there as well. Okay, so Kate asks, question. We're still at the start of our online fundraising journey. We're very much a bids and foundations funded charity at the moment. We've built our audience online, but it is mainly our service users who engage, and we don't want to target them for fundraising. Any advice where to start with one part-time fundraiser and one very part-time digital media?
Sorry, I'm just going to run through that again. We're at the start of our online fundraising journey. We're very much bids and foundations funded charity at the moment. We've built our audience online, but it's mainly our services engagement. We don't want to target them for fundraising. Yeah, you need to start building a fundraising audience, essentially, and that can be often hard to do. A good place to start is maybe creating some partnerships. Are there any other organisations who are doing something similar to you that you could potentially leverage off the back of? Depending on what charity you are as well, might depend on your first get started. You need to start social media. You'll start pulling in people from there, and adding some really good content to your site, blogs, that sort of thing as well. So you can start getting some SEO ranking and some website traffic. Given that there's the lack of physical worlds is physical face-to-face interactions is unavailable at the moment, and you really need to start building that digital presence, pulling people into your website. And catching people's information, so getting people to log in, register, sign up, and obviously consent for you to content them. I think you're probably right. Not asking service users to be your donors, but you can ask them for help in finding donors. I'm sure they'll be all happy to help that. Maybe some sort of referral service where they don't have to give to you directly, but we've got we're looking for funding. If you know anyone who would help support us, please share this as well. There's no better type of marketing than word of mouth marketing, and partners can always help. I always relate to a mushroom cloud, right? They can really help, expand your reach and expand, push your messaging further. But it's all about, I think the best place to start is to create that digital presence, get people on board to help share your message, and then curate, iterate, and test. We've got a whole suite of content as well that can help with you get started. I'm sure Zoe's furiously taking notes at the minute about all these resources I'm talking about, so we will be able to help you with that as well.
Brilliant, thank you. So our next question is a little bit more about subscribers and how engagement can be affected by activities. This question comes from Juanita, who I think we've discussed before. She says, I've been sending out a daily email containing a link to a virtual advent calendar, which features things such as kids showing you around where they live, cooking, washing. So quite intimate and get to know you kind of thing. It's linked to our Christmas campaign, but more for the fun of it. So this sounds quite engaging to me so far. Unfortunately, Juanita's found that she's had about 100 unsubscribes, although checking on their record, they've almost been sort of deadwood. They're not donors, but is this sort of normal when you do an intense marketing activity? And they were in the region of around 1,200 subscribers when they started. So, Chris.
Yeah, this is very much my forte. I think you're always in danger of being over spammy, even though I think the campaigns, I love the idea. You're always in danger of getting high numbers of unsubscribe from the more emails you send. A way to avoid that, and it's something we've brought in recently, is by targeting. So, for example, it's an advent calendar. So on day one, you might want to break it up into weeks. For example, week one, you'll get X amount of openers who open the email. You might only send week two to the people who opened week one, for an example. You could do that on the daily, but you'd probably end up, people who might be enjoyed but might catch up with it 2 or 3 days later. So if you were to split that into weeks, you would cut out the people who aren't that interested in the campaign in week two, and then you could carry that into week 3 and week 4. Any sort of unsubscribe rate tends to mean that your campaign isn't targeted enough and people aren't interested in what you're trying to say. There's the point about deadwood, and there's a question of will you necessarily miss them? I think it's not always great to lose people, and I think targeting does avoid that. There's always sort of re-engagement campaigns that you can do, that we try to do every sort of 3 to 6 months, where we try and get people back involved with, one of the campaigns I've done at Google, we basically, to get people re-engaged, we put a picture of a "we miss you" with a cat and a picture of a "we miss you" to a dog. A/B tested it. The dog won, surprisingly. I'm a dog person. And then that one went out and we brought a lot of people back in. So while there might not be donors, it's about finding the unique interests of each people, or in creating those sub-segments of groups to target specific comms at. I hope that answered your question in a little bit more detail.
Brilliant, yes. It's an interesting way to mix it up. No, I haven't thought of that. Yeah. That's really good advice.
I've just seen Juanita's comment. I mean, MailChimp does all the segmentation stuff for you, Juanita, so incredible tool to use. So I think you're just beginning of what will be a very, very long email marketing journey, I'm sure. But keep checking in with us for help and advice.
Oh, amazing, thank you. So our next question is a little bit about the relationship sort of between digital and charities. Chris says, 92% of charities moving online is brilliant. We believe that 10 years of digital progress was achieved in the first 4 months of the COVID crisis. Are charities doing enough to protect themselves in this digital world? We think some are, but many are not. How do we bring those in who are not on the journey?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, Chris, and my very brutal and honest answer is no. I don't think they're doing enough to protect them. We are pivoting a lot of our pivoting. I laugh when I say pivoting because I think it feels like it's been the buzzword this year. We've had to pivot this, pivot that, but we're actually turning a lot of our content towards cybersecurity now, because we think while the change has been great, charities are leaving themselves very vulnerable to cybercrime. We created a brilliant podcast, and I can say that because I wasn't on it. The other week, that was about a really small charity talking through their breach and how they dealt with it. I would highly recommend going to going and checking that out, because it's exactly that, as I said throughout the session, right? As we become more digitally sophisticated, so do cyber criminals, and sort of the levels of data that we're using, and being able to use them properly, and know what we do with them. So but my short answer is no, but I think to get them on the journey, they need to come and read and learn from people like us, people like the NCSC, people who are talking about this, you know, on the daily. We've got products that exist like Scurio, Avast, all that types of things that can really help charities get a leg up and get started.
Amazing, thank you. Oh, and some very kind words from Georgia, who says, thanks for an amazing presentation. Thank you, Georgia. Georgia wanted to ask, what platforms should charities be paying attention to in 2021? It would be great to get your opinion on the digital trends we should be aware of and adopting into our practice next year, and any recommendations you have.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be a bit wary of what I say here, because I think we're going to do a webinar on this in the new year, more in-depth one. In terms of platforms to look out for, I've been keeping a close eye on TikTok. I don't think it's been cracked for charities yet, but it's got potential, especially for the younger demographic audience that tend to be, give quite a lot as well. So TikTok's an area of interest, I think, in terms of a social fundraising aspect of it as well. Event platforms are going to be, I'm really excited what will happen to the event platforms in the next sort of year. What we haven't seen yet, and we run 4 or 5 virtual events a year, as well as all these webinars and podcasts. Nobody's cracked the networking side of virtual events. Like that is a massive piece of low-hanging fruit. No one's been able to do networking properly at a virtual event from a personal point of view. I think that's one to be looking at, and how we can, recreate those similar vibe, face-to-face interactions that we get at a personal event. So I think there's something to be watched there. And then one thing, the third thing, I'll keep it at 3 for now, that I think charities should be aware of and pay more attention to, is something that we don't talk about enough, but we will be very soon, is CRMs. So customer relationship management systems. I think as we go to these hybrid models, the importance of, the importance of CRM will grow tenfold, essentially. So those are my sort of shoot from the hip 3 sort of trends I think we can be looking out for. But like I said, we'll do something a bit more in depth in the new year.
Amazing, thank you. And stay tuned for more content from us about this next year. Okay, our next question is from Fares, who asks, what do you think about having an e-commerce platform to increase sales and visibility for charities?
Yeah, sorry, got attacked by a cough there. Yeah, I think they're certainly, if you have physical products to sell, the massive things, or if you're maybe moving from you might have a charity shop, for example, in Age UK, British Heart Foundation, that sort of stuff. I think to have an e-commerce component to websites is crucial. Being able to sell things online and not reliant on the physical shop, I think that it is actually really important. Zoe, actually, who's producing the webinar today, wrote an amazing article about Depop being the future of charity sales, and how it works very similar to the vintage stores out there, and how vintage stores are going so much online. So being able to build that e-commerce platform into your current offering it's important, because it gives you that next level. It becomes that hybrid way of working that I've said it'll be a buzzword for next year. It's been a buzzword in this webinar. So it's kind of like, that's the way we're going. I think if you have that component to your charity and you wish to sell things, we can't be so reliant on the charity shop anymore. People are used to buying online now. I did all my Christmas shopping online this year.
Brilliant. Okay, so slightly similar question to what we've had before, but Ashley, thank you for your question. Ashley asks, what advice would you give to charities who are just starting out on their digital fundraising journey?
Yeah, I think we kind of chatted on this before, but there's the one key thing is audience. You can't do anything without an audience. So whether it's building or understand, or you already have whether it's building an audience, or whether it's you already have an audience, you need to get to understand them. If you do, figure out what their interests are, their likes or interests are, and start feeding them content based on that. Content is key. in all this thing, and that's kind of what we live by here. It's all about good, engaging content, whether that's video, audio, imagery, all that sort of thing. I think it's really, really important to get people, get people the right content in the right place at the right time. Essentially, I think that's the sort of best advice. I did a webinar halfway through the year about like fighting crisis with content, and I very much split that into two things: knowing your audience and creating compelling content. That's what keeps people coming back, and then you can start to build in a lot of what we were talked about earlier. Building those individual fundraising journeys, depending on the type of donor they are, depending on the interest. Whether they hit interest 1, interest 2, interest 3, then back in, that sort of thing. But at the very start, understand the environment, understand the audience, understand what they're like, and then you'll have a good sense of what you need to do next.
Okay, great, thank you. And Stuart asked something that you did sort of address earlier, but I still think it's worth asking, so thanks for the question. Stuart says, great presentation, Chris. Do you think that now that more things have moved online, that cybersecurity and safeguarding should be a priority?
100%. I could shout this from the rooftops, as I kind of have answered. I can't remember who asked the question earlier. Sorry, Chris's question. I think it was Chris Roberts. Yeah, and it's about, as Chris also said in the comments, it's about really protecting yourselves on many levels. As you kind of said, charities have got this sort of think they've done enough, but really there's deeper roots and deeper levels that we really need to go on, making sure that they're properly protected, and not just themselves, but they're people as well. There's so many phishing emails going on. There's so many more sophisticated ways of getting data and acquiring data. You can only see what happened to the likes of Blackboard this year, and a number of, again, I'll bring up that small charity advice. So honestly, the best piece of advice I could give you, if you're a charity who might think you're protected or don't think cybersecurity is important enough, I would really recommend going and listen to our podcast last week, where Greg shared his story of how his charity thought they were totally fine, and then all of a sudden got hit with this massive phishing scenario and scam, and that was it. Could have cost them thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. But yeah, I would definitely recommend going to do that, because I think it will become more of a priority in 2021. Actually, it probably should have been something I included on my list, but there's one for the new year. So thanks for calling me out on that. I appreciate it. But yeah, I kind of understand why it hasn't been front of mind, but it definitely does need to be.
Great, thank you. Yeah, quite valuable insight, right? Especially at a time like this. I just wanted to say we have crossed the 2 o'clock mark. We are going to keep going. We're going to keep answering questions. For anyone who has to leave now, and I understand some of you have already had to sort of move on, all of it's going to be here in the recording. So please come back and catch anything you weren't able to get sort of live, as it were. So now we're going to move on to a question, sort of, I think, quite a marketing specialism. Helen asks, what do you think about pop-ups on websites to collect data to help grow your data?
Yeah, I think they could work quite well, especially if you haven't got an audience. I think it's worth doing. I would also look at exit intent pop-ups as well. So people have already sort of engaged with your content a little bit first, or you might want to put it on sort of an engagement wall, set up a journey where you've got like sort of metering. So we have this on our site as well. If you're a new visitor to us, we don't want to force you to sign in straight away. We want you to see a few articles first, and it's a kind of less invasive way of capturing that data as well. So you might want to read something, a cool donation story, and if they go to a next page, you can share them that pop up on the next page as well. But I think it can be a really effective way to capture data. I think there's a lot of ways to do them wrong though. So I think that's worth paying attention to as well. And people are used to clicking the close bar now on them as well. So you've got to be really creative and come up with really unique ways of kind of getting people to commit. Another way to get around that is maybe collecting small amounts of data in the beginning and following them up to collect bigger amounts of data. So we have a 2-step registration for process where you might collect, base data that you need. So name, email, that sort of thing. But you might run a separate campaign. You want to get them on your list and start getting them to donate. You can run a separate campaign somewhere down the line to get more information, or when they do eventually convert as a donation, you collect that information then. But it's essentially collecting the data that you need to start building those interest groups. Really, you can also do that from the content to watch as well if you've got a good enough website.
Thank you. Very interesting information there. We talked a little bit about CRMs earlier, and now we've got an interesting question from David about them. First of all, he says, great all-round advice, Chris. So well done.
Thank you. So very kind.
Yeah, actually, this afternoon, everyone, I mean, I am like really chuffed with all the sort of compliments that we're getting. So thank you very much. We've got a lot of work into being as positive as we can, but it's always nice to sort of get it back. It's very gratifying. Thank you. David asks, what good CRM would you recommend for a small charity of 5 users to cover the following areas: membership, events, volunteer management, training, CPD, fundraising and donations? Because something like Microsoft Dynamics is possibly just a bit too big. So is there anything a bit more tailored to what they're doing?
Yeah, for the smaller charities, I saw this coming. I was trying to rack my brain. We have a great article on this that I might have to dig up and refer to, that has it actually spaced out by size as well. And for the life of me, I can't remember what is that sort of bottom end. I think Civi CRM might be one. I know, Robbie, you've got a lot more experience with that than I have, but that's what our customer service team of 5 people use, for example. And I don't remember that pricing on that sort of stuff. Can you? Something we can share afterwards.
That's okay. I don't know off the top of my head, but Civi CRM, it's very sort of user-friendly. It's out there. I think it's an open source one, but I'm not going to talk too much more about the specifics. But if that's something you're open to trying, we find it really helpful for us. And it's really good with plugging in with other things that you might use. If you use things, like Salesforce, etc., we find it useful.
Yeah, there's a couple in the chat as well. Donify, Donor Perfect, I think, as well, which is more for donor management, that sort of thing. I don't know if they do the full suite of everything you require in there. Salesforce's sort of non-profit one might be a bit too big as well for what you're looking to do. There's loads. I know Hughes have something that's going on there as well, and obviously Blackboard as well. Thank you is also recommended. Thanks, Gavin. Remind me what's in our articles. It sounds terrible, I know, but if we go through so many, sometimes I have to refresh myself. But David, we'll get back to you on that. We'll include that in the resources as well.
We've talked a lot about sort of, the unexpected good news and kind of the benefit of it, because prior to sort of starting the webinar today, Chris and I were just talking about how sort of, misery loves company. So once you sort of start thinking that it's doom and gloom, that sort of mindset can perpetuate. But when you look at the figures and the stats and, kind of the reality of what's going on out there, we did it. We survived 2020.
We did, almost. We're almost there. I think well done, everybody. And yep, we've got some stuff coming up in the next few weeks and in January. So our final podcast release is going out next week. That's kind of a similar vibe to today. So I think you'll all enjoy it. I met with 3 of our friends from the sector. So Ika Pito from Trillium, Michaela Leah-Vogue from Marie Curie, and Dean Gillespie, who's a really good friend of ours from All We Can, and we just chatted about it's a lot more conversational than this was today. So go give it a listen, find out what different sort of aspects people thought about. And we're talking about the digital evolution and the digital revolution, as I mentioned today. So definitely worth a go. We've got some webinars already in for January. So Zoya Mar and the digital code of practice are joining us on the 14th, which will be Supercharge Your Digital 2021. And then we've got AWS coming and joining us on the 28th, which is how 2021 may become the most digital fundraising year ever. And then we, of course, have released our Be More Digital conferences coming on the 2nd and to the 4th of March. Really good one this year. Going to have 2 days of talks sandwiched in, which will be have a day of workshop sandwich in the middle, so definitely worth checking out, and we'll be releasing all more information on that as we go. But that's it. I'm going to let you good people go. Enjoy your afternoon. Please stay safe. Have an amazing Christmas holiday time, and we really hope to see you in the new year. Thanks, everybody.